So nowadays I can sit down and watch pretty much anything. Different genres, different animation styles, stuff I would have clicked off without a second thought a few years ago. But it was not always like that. For a long time, if it wasn't shonen or isekai, I didn't want to hear about it. Like you could come to me hyping up some anime, and the moment I heard, oh, it's a slow burn, I was already gone in my head, already checked out. And the crazy part, I didn't even feel like I was missing anything. I genuinely thought I just knew what I liked. Which, okay, I could have been right. But I was also completely closed off without even realizing it. Because, I and a lot of people grew up with anime on TV. Naruto, One Piece, Yu Gi Oh! You know how it is when you're a kid. You watch some episodes, you don't really think about it. I wasn't obsessed or anything. I wasn't tracking episodes or whatever. It was just kind of there. The moment I actually started watching anime for real was around 2019, maybe early 2020. And what did I go straight for? Isekai. Sword Art Online was one of the first ones, I'm pretty sure. And honestly, that makes sense, right? You're young, you want the cool power fantasy. Guy gets teleported to another world, becomes insanely strong. Somehow, every single girl falls in love with him, and he just doesn't get it. Classic. That was the dream. But at some point, I just kind of drifted away from it. I'd watch something here and there, a short anime or whatever was around, and I had this idea in my head that the anime industry just wasn't producing that much good stuff anymore, which, looking back, was completely wrong. That was just me not knowing where to look, or more honestly, not being open enough to look anywhere different. And I think that's where the age thing comes in. Because I'm turning 22 now, and I started watching properly when I was like 16. That's not the biggest gap on paper, but something genuinely shifted in how I see things, how I approach things. When you're younger, you want everything immediately, the action, the tension, the payoff, fast. And that's not even a bad thing, that's just where you are in life. You have that energy, you want stimulation, you want things to move. But as you get a little older, at least for me, I start getting more patient, not just with anime, just as a person in general. More calm, more willing to sit with something and let it breathe. And that changed everything. Because a lot of anime I would have closed in episode 2, I start actually finishing. And some of them hit me in ways I genuinely didn't expect. Like a story would get to a certain point and I'd be actually invested. If I tried watching this 2 years ago, I would have called it boring after 20 minutes and never touched it again. And that's just a weird feeling, like realizing how much you were missing just because of how you were, not because of the anime. So, what exactly changed things? Because it wasn't only age, it was a few things happening at the same time. And I'm pretty sure one of them was just curiosity. At some point, I got curious about what else was out there. Like when you've been eating the same thing for years, and one day you're just like, let me try something different. There's no big reason, you're just curious. That's generally what it felt like. But the thing that actually broke it open for me was Freerun and Dungeon Mechi, both adventure anime, both have fights, fantasy elements, all of that. So on the surface, they weren't that far from what I already watched, but they had so much more going underneath. Freerun especially. It's slow, it's emotional. It deals with grief and time and what it actually means to know someone. And I remember watching it thinking, this is different. This is doing something I haven't felt from an anime before. And that kind of broke something open. Because if this anime that looked familiar could feel that different, what else was I sleeping on? What else had I been skipping for no reason? The other thing is honestly just how much anime comes out nowadays. Every season there's a ton of different stuff. And when there's that much variety, you start bumping into things you would never have chosen yourself. The volume alone helped me open up without even realizing it. But there's the thing I actually had to understand. And this sounds obvious, but it really isn't until it properly clicks. But not every anime was made to do the same thing. I was going into romance expecting the energy of an action series. I was watching slice of life waiting for something to happen. And it wasn't going to, because that's not what those animes were trying to do. Some anime were made to make you laugh. Some were made to make you think. Some were made to give you a very specific kind of sad. Some were generally just made to make you feel cozy and relaxed for 20 minutes. And that's the whole point. And I was coming in every time with completely the wrong expectations. It's like going to a chill dinner with friends and getting annoyed that nobody's dancing. That's not what this is. Nobody promised you that. Once I started thinking about what an anime was actually trying to do instead of what I wanted it to do, once I started thinking about what an anime was actually trying to do instead of what I wanted the anime to do, everything became easier to watch. Not everything became good, but everything at least got a fair chance. And speaking of fair chances, you're not always going to like what you watch. And that's completely fine. I think there's this pressure sometimes where if you don't end up loving the anime, you feel like you wasted your time, like you did something wrong. But I generally don't see it like that anymore. There were anime I sat with, I gave every chance to, I tried to enjoy, and still got to the end and thought, yeah, that just wasn't for me. And that's a valid outcome. You gave it a real shot, you were present for it, and it just wasn't your thing. That's fine. That happens. What changed for me is that I stopped watching anime wanting to either love it or hate it. I started actually being in it, scene by scene, moment by moment. And sometimes those moments are great even when the overall anime isn't. Sometimes it's a single conversation between two characters or a specific track that plays at the right time or just the way something is animated in one scene. And for me, that's enough to make the whole thing just a little worth. You don't need to love everything. You just need to actually be there while you're watching it. So, practically, what does this actually look like? Because I know this whole thing can sound a little contradictory, like, okay, be more open, but also have the right expectations. Which is it? And look, both things are true at the same time. They're not opposites. The first thing I'd say is just read the synopsis. I know that sounds incredibly basic, but it generally helps more than people think. Not to judge whether you like it before you start, just to know what kind of experience you're actually signing up for. If the synopsis says, a girl navigates high school while dealing with loss, that's what it is. That's the anime. Go in knowing that. Second thing, and this one actually changed how I watch anime, think about what you're watching while you're watching it. Not in some deep analytical way. Just be there. What is this scene trying to do? What is this character actually feeling right now? Because the moment you start asking those questions, the anime opens up completely differently. Things that looked slow start feeling intentional. Moments that seemed small start having meaning. And the third thing is just adjust your expectations to the anime, not the other way around. A 2015 romance is not going to move at the pace of a 2025 romance. And that's not a flaw, that's just what it is. If you go in waiting for something to happen, you're going to be miserable the whole time, and it's not even the anime's fault. At least most of the times. Not everything is going to be good. Some anime are generally just mid or even bad, and you'll figure that out pretty quickly. But a lot of the stuff I almost skipped, some of it is now in my favorites, and I would have missed all of it if I'd stayed closed off.